Good morning and welcome in SimWorld today on this August the 2nd, Friday solo edition of SimWorld today. Appreciate you tuning in. We got plenty to get to as plenty of off the field and off the court news, plus some SimWorld prep tournament announcements. We get our fifth announcement of the season. We'll get to that, but let's start on the gridiron where DeAndre Hopkins has been ruled out for 4 to 6 weeks for the Tennessee Titans. We have not gotten an indication of what the injury is, but 4 to 6 weeks tells you could be a couple things. Hyperextension, those can sometimes be shorter than 4 to 6 weeks. Could be a torn meniscus, in which they're just doing the quick snip and clean up. That is the shorter version of that. Normally requires an MRI, but as far as I've seen, we haven't gotten an official diagnosis of this injury. But he's out 4 to 6 weeks. Now, does that matter? The season kicks off September 5th, which is about 4 weeks from today. That is obviously with the Chiefs, and that is now with the Titans. So add in a couple days after that. I don't think this sky is falling for the Tennessee Titans, though. As a Jags fan, hey, fingers crossed, right? Not for the injury, just for the sky is falling. But to the point of the issue, I don't think this is reason to panic in Tennessee. DeAndre Hopkins is a very talented wide receiver, and in some cases, I think the lack of having to go through the beatdown that can be the preseason can be positive. Now, look, when he gets back in whatever capacity, and again, it's tough saying much with a knee injury that we are in so unknown land on of what it actually is. You're still going to have a little bit of ramp up for Hopkins to get into playing shape. Obviously, that's really the main focus of the preseason, particularly for these starting players where they pretty much know their situation. It's more about surviving the preseason than it is earning a spot, earning a piece on the roster. Hopkins obviously is not battling for any type of spot to make that 56-man roster in the long run. Now, this is a huge loss nonetheless for the Titans because if when he comes back, let's put it on the long end, 6 weeks, that's 2 weeks without Hopkins likely during the regular season. And there's a lot of question marks around this team. Is Burks going to be capable of being their number one wide receiver? I could tell you, as a fantasy owner of his last season, it was less than excellent at many points in the season. Now, does that equate to a good regular season? Of course not. That means nothing. But there's a lot more pressure now on the rest of this roster to step up in a situation where they truly need it. And this is a team that's overgone a relatively large overhaul, right? You lose Derrick Henry during the offseason. You now have to figure out, can you institute a new running game, a new running back, a quarterback taking over more solidly in year 2? This is not an easy fix for Tennessee, and to be without their number one guy is going to make what was already going to be a bit of a challenging season for the Titans all the more so. Is that the end of the world? Again, no, I don't think it is, but this was a team that really is going to rely on, for obvious reasons, DeAndre Hopkins. Without him for 4 to 6 weeks, I think is major cause for concern for Tennessee in terms of what do they look like on the field for 2 weeks. Can you go down 0-2, assuming, again, 6 weeks? Let's assume they lose the first 2, which I don't think is a guarantee, obviously. It's hard to dig out of that hole. So the closer you get to 4, the better. What I think I'm more interested in is what is the cause of this injury? Is it just a hyperextension? Did he sprain his knee? Is it something minor that didn't require him to go under the knife or doesn't require him to go under the knife? Then I think there's reason to just say, okay, you know what? We're going to keep him fresh. He's going to come out and hopefully ramp up pretty quickly to get to playing shape. All right, let's head to SWBA, where Gordon Hayward announced his retirement at the end of 14 years in the NBA. The 34-year-old ended his career averaging just over 15 points per game. Of course, the peak of those times came with the Utah Jazz before his brief stint with the Boston Celtics, mired by, of course, one of the more gruesome injuries in recent SWBA history, and then kind of a bouncing around of Charlotte, and then wrapping up last season in Oklahoma City. What's the takeaway, man? I thought Gordon Hayward had a fantastic career. I think in many instances, though, if we want to go maybe on the more negative side, I thought maybe he misplayed a couple spots. I think there's no way to foretell his career outcome. Obviously, it's changed based off that injury in Cleveland. But The decision by him to sign with Charlotte, I thought was a puzzling one. He took the money in an instance where, if you remember back at that point in time, there was a ton of linkage from him to potentially being a sign and trade to Indiana. And if you look at the trajectory of those two programs, obviously Indiana probably would have been the better option, returning home to a place where he played in college in Butler, and for an organization that has been much more on the rise. Obviously, at the time, it didn't have Tyrese Halliburton, and you can't play this musical chairs of everything happens the exact same. But Indiana has always been an organization committed to winning, and Charlotte, I don't think you quite equate that. But it was a payday move by him. I think that's a tough way to end his career because it ends up in Oklahoma City, where he thought he was going to be, and Oklahoma City thought he was going to be a much bigger part of their season down the stretch. Didn't even score a point in 7 postseason games. So it's a challenging end. It's kind of an end that, for a career on the whole, you rate as probably like a B plus, but you look at the end of it, and if that's all you paid attention to, it's a bit of a sour taste because Gordon Hayward in Utah was a bucket. He was an all-star in 2017. He was a huge part of that, and he left right as Donovan Mitchell was arriving on the scene. They drafted Donovan Mitchell. I believe it was the season after he left. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong there. I think it was the season after, the summer rather, that Gordon Hayward left was the summer that they drafted Donovan Mitchell. If you look at that, I mean, you want to talk about what ifs in Utah. Hayward, Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert. It's a pretty good threesome to be running with, and we never got to see that. So it's always the end of Gordon Hayward's career, I think, is very indicative of the whole of it, in that you really liked it, you liked the options, but there was always more to be had, whether that be the decision to stay in Utah, whether that be the injury, or whether that be the decision to go to Charlotte. Would I call those the right decisions? It's not maybe what I would have done in all of them, but again, it's tough to look at the Boston decision with the injury, knowledge of that, because at the time it probably made a ton of sense. Of course, you have Kyrie there, Al Horford, but an overall positive season, a positive career, and he's always going to have the one highlight that everyone is always going to look back on and say if it went in, right? And I think that too is indicative of Gordon Hayward's career. This half-court heave against Duke that would have won the SimWorld U national championship game, that backboard rims out, and that's kind of Gordon Hayward's career. Looks great, you think it's good, and then it just doesn't hit at the end. But congratulations, because let's also say this, 14 years in the SWBA is not easy to do. So congratulations to Gordon Hayward on a fantastic career, and best of luck to him in retirement, because I'm sure he's watching this and is going to hear all that. So anyway, let's move on to SimWorld Prep, where we have another tournament announcement. So let's give you a quick recap. We've got Battle in the Bayou. We know that's coming up. We know DC Legacy Games is going to kick off the SimWorld Prep season. We've got 2 California games, or tournaments, Golden State Showdown and West Coast Takeover. So we've got some Louisiana, we've got some DC, and we've got some California. Let's add Texas to the list, folks. We are pleased to announce Lonestar Invitational, as SimWorld Prep will be returning to Texas for Season 3. This time we're headed to Highland Park. For the first time, we'll be at Championship Stadium. Our 6 teams in here: Lonestar, shocker, right? Houston, Gulf Coast Lockdown, Latin America, the Scorchers, and Africa. So now we have 2. We just got the leak of the jerseys for the Scorchers. We have confirmation that the new program has 2 tournaments in the books for them. West Coast Takeover now, Lonestar Invitational. Not a ton of takeaways. I'm excited for this one. We get Gulf Coast and we get Houston in the same tournament with Kai Killens and Almighty Soul, 2 of the biggest names in SimWorld Prep. That's going to be a fantastic watch. We've got Lonestar. We just had on the show Trey Bird, him and his Lonestar teammates playing their one hosting tournament. So I'm excited for this one. primarily because the names at the top of the ticker, Almighty Soul, Kai Killens. But, adding the Scorchers back in there, adding Latin America, giving us some international flair, plus the introduction of Africa's season here, because just checking the notes here, they have not been in any other tournament. So this is Africa's first released tournament. I've been told that not pretty much, every single team is going to be playing 4 tournaments during this time. That's what I've been told. That figure could obviously change, but that gives us 2 already for Scorchers. So we know they're in California. We know they're in Texas. All right, that's our show. We've been locked in on the Olympics. We didn't talk about it mostly because the Olympics has been big, heavy into gymnastics, which USA, congratulations to them, and Simone Biles rocked their way to gold. Swimming has been racking up. What's on the horizon, though, if you can peer out for me, just looking ahead, we got the 100-meter, both men's and women's track and field events coming. Just saw qualification rounds where we booked 16 names into the or maybe 20 names into the semifinals. So I've always been a big track and field fan, so that's coming up. We'll probably recap and again take terrible couch takes on how that all goes. What else have we been locked into? We've been locked into some rowing, folks. I can't row for heck because I'm a smaller dude in terms of length, and it's not a short man's game. But let me tell you what, folks on the water are absolute animals, men and women. Absolutely riveting conversation and content to watch. We'll keep locking in, keep delivering everything. Probably Marshpod's going to be plenty of that on Monday. But that's our show for today. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back on Monday with a weekend full of sports. Also, can't believe we put this in here. SWFL Hall of Fame game. That started. I don't recap preseason games, but hey, gridiron football is back, baby. Unless you're locked into the Canadian Football League, which, your boy always is. So here we go. We're coming back on Monday here on SimWorld TV, the only place you can see the game, be the game.